introduction. Thanks for being head of the college dance. Josh, thank you for your story. Thank you guys all for coming out. I'm going to lose the jacket. You know, middle of the afternoon on a Wednesday, right? This many folks come out. It's very cool. This is my 6th or 7th university on this this trip this week. I think I end up tomorrow. I actually going to Blacksburg too, so I don't want to make it. And you know, want to talk about student debt. Want to talk about some ideas about it. But I also then want to make sure I hear back from all of you on that subject or any other subject. This is really kind of we'll start with student debt, but this is town hall. You know, a couple of years back, and let me acknowledge on the front end, the challenges around student debt at UVA are probably less than almost any other institution in Virginia. Because you've got such a high completion rate in 4 years, because there's a fairly substantial student assistance program, because the folks, a lot of times challenges running on the graduate school into the circumstance. So let me put the preface to my comments that this may not be as much of an issue here, but it is an issue of national importance. Student debt right now, $1.2 trillion. More student debt than there's credit card debt. I spend a lot of time, obviously, running around Virginia. I hear more about student debt, not just from people your age, but from parents and folks in their 20s and 30s than almost any other issue. And it really is something that if we don't wrestle with, then maybe not you guys, but a whole generation of your peers may not have the same kind of opportunities that perhaps you won't have, and quite honestly, that I have. Kat was great on her introduction. She kind of left out part of the story, though. I am the first person in my family to graduate from college, went to GW, and then I went to the UVA of the North, Harvard for law school. And, did get out. I got out with $15,000 worth of debt. Because my folks, just like you, didn't have me. They helped me a little bit, but then after my first year, I had to work and get grants and loans. What she didn't tell you, though, was, our growing up and once a successful business guy, not really the full story. My first business venture, I took my life savings, $5,000, invested them in a little energy startup company, went to work as an entrepreneur, and in 6 weeks, I helped that company go totally bankrupt. I went into real estate after that and failed miserably in that after about 6 months. So not to scare any of you, but I think I was 26 or 27 with an undergrad and a JD, basically living out of my car, sleeping on my friends' couches. And the point I made, my third shot, I got into the cell phone industry in the early 80s and co-founded Nextel and eked out a living. But the point of the story is that if I come out with the way many students are now, with $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 for the debt, I'm not sure I would have had the courage or the ability to try to take those multiple chances. And again, at UVA, I think the average debt for undergrad is only about $23,000. We get into the graduate school levels, it gets higher. But it really is an enormous challenge. So I want to share with you 4 or 5 ideas, and I'll try to do this very briefly so we can really make this a conversation on how we might be able to address this issue. Recognizing on the front end, and let me acknowledge that none of these are simple silver bullet. The first 2 are ideas that are really kind of moot for all of you here, because you're already in school. There are more ideas that would be focused on how you make the right choice and how you can look at college and perhaps a different idea. And let me share both of them. One is, and UVA, I imagine this is already the case, how many of you entered college with either AP or dual enrollment, some earlier credits before you came to college? If we ask that same question at virtually every other university in Virginia, the numbers would be 1/10 that number. But if we're really going to think about, particularly first-generation kids, getting to college, we got to think, does college still have to be 4 years? Can we knock a semester or a year off in high school? Can we do dual enrollment in community college? Now the challenge is, how do you do that with what's called articulation agreements? Because one of the challenges is not only to get the credits, but to have those credits actually count towards your degree requirements, not towards your electives. So, I started this a little bit when I was governor. We've not pursued it as much as I think it needs to be re-examined. But I'm very much looking at how we can expand articulation agreements so that dual enrollment credits particularly count towards degree. And one part of the federal law that would change, that would help make this possible, again, particularly for first-generation kids and low-income kids, would be if you qualify for a Pell Grant, why shouldn't you be able to use part of your Pell Grant in high school if you're actually getting credit that counts towards your degree requirement? So one proposal right there. Second proposal, and this again kind of goes into the bipartisan stuff. I got a bill with Marco Rubio. He's the new Republican senator from Florida, and he's got a student debt story better than mine. I think if my memory serves, he was first generation as well. It took him almost until he got to the U.S. Senate before he paid off his student debt in college and law school. And here's our, it's kind of a no-brainer, but nothing in Washington seems to be a no-brainer these days. It's called Know Before You Go. It would say, why shouldn't we create a user-friendly website, just like any of the various travel sites out there, that place every college, every community college, every vocational and technical school out there with full transparency on what's your chances of graduating, how much average debt are you going to have to take on, how long does it normally take to graduate, if you major in a particular field, art history the way my daughter did, what's your chance of getting a job, how much is it going to pay. So how do we make sure that we inform people before they go to school to become better informed consumers? College education next to buying a house is probably the most expensive investment you'll make in your lifetime. Yet, I wonder how many of you really fully appreciate it. You got sticker price versus real price. Nobody puts on how much all the additional fees are. How do you get this right in a way that should be user-friendly? We collect all this data already. Why not present it in a way that is truly usable? I was at Piedmont Community College a couple months ago and looking at some of the med tech programs there. They have a 95% placement rate. The jobs, 45 to 70 grand starting on there. I'm not saying that should be your choice, but I think that, having that information out there, I think would be, again, a dramatic step forward. So those are the two ideas that come before you get to school. You say, well, that's fine, Warner. What about I'm already here, or I'm about to graduate, or I'm about to go into graduate school? What do we do? And there's three proposals on those. One would be, and this falls, we may take, the Senate may take it up next week. I don't think it's going to, I'm not sure it's going to really pass, and there probably needs to be more work on it. But particularly when you have undergraduate debt and graduate debt, sometimes it's very hard to consolidate those. Sometimes if you've got a Stafford or one of the federal guarantee programs, you may have relatively low debt, low interest rates. But when you get into the private market on borrowing money, you can get 7, 8, 9% interest rates. If you can get a mortgage at 4.25%, why shouldn't you be able to refinance all your student debt down to those levels? So we're working on a major refinancing plan. The challenge is how you get the finances right, but that would be one suggestion. Two others that are more bipartisan, and I think, again, would take steps in the right direction. One of them is, again, with Marco Rubio, and it basically is saying, why don't we make the number one option for most students getting out of school? This is already kind of in the mix out there, but it's very complicated, and it's not the way we would propose it. Income-based repayment. We would say your student debt payments on an annual basis would be capped at 10% of your salary. So that if you wanted to go out and take a risk, you wanted to go out and try starting a business, you want to go ahead and, try to buy that house, you could afford to do it. I saw a guy the other day in Virginia Beach who was 31. I forgot where he went undergrad, but he went to University of Michigan Law School. And he had been out for a couple of years, had been working at the common attorney's office, got laid off. He was moving back not at 26, 22, but 31, because he was paying $2,000 a month on student debt payments with virtually no income. You talk about something that could crush him. So this notion of income-based repayment, with a cap of 10%. Now, it might mean you'd be paying longer, and it would mean your numbers will go up as hopefully you make more income. But I think a rational approach. And then the last, before we get to the conversation part, is an idea that all of them should be the easiest. But again, nothing seems to be easy in Washington. It is simply this. Right now, if you work for a company, and if Josh was working for company X over here, and they wanted to send him back to get his master's, an employer could take up to $5,000 of your salary and apply it against your tuition, and you get that pre-tax. Well, if you can do that for ongoing education, why not do it for debt as well? So, you're coming out, you make 45 grand. If you choose, you could say, okay, I'll take home 40 grand, but pay that $5,000 directly against my student debt. You get it pre-tax, the employer doesn't cost anything more, great retention tool, but a common sense way that we can kind of, again, help alleviate part of this challenge. Because, in a global economy, in an economy where talent and access to capital are going to be driving forces, you shouldn't go broke in America going to college. And unfortunately, what we are doing at, again, not so much at UVA, but at other institutions, is that we are pricing this ability to kind of get the education and skills you need beyond your reach. So those are 4 or 5 of the ideas I'm working on. And again, keep in mind, $1.2 trillion is your net number, going up dramatically. And it's in part, the last comment I'll make before we open up the conversation, and part of the reason this has happened is, if you look over the last 20 years, the direct state and federal assistance to higher education is almost a straight line down. If you look at cost of higher education, it's almost a straight line up. And in many ways, what we've done is we've filled that gap by simply making it very, very easy for you folks to buy. And again, that most times works out at UVA. At a lot of places it doesn't work out. And nobody, gets more disadvantaged than if you're 3 years in, even at UVA, 3 years in, if you don't finish. And a lot of schools that unfortunately is a circumstance. So this is an issue that I think is going to continue to resonate. It is building some, I think, real capacity. I would urge you, I know this is an election year, I'm asking to get rehired. But if students, if young people voted in their percentages, this would be a top 5 issue in the country. And my final appeal before you, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here if you showed up on Wednesday afternoon for this kind of conversation, but as you see your friends and they say, I'm sick of all the politics, which I'm sure a lot of people say, if they do that and turn off the TV or turn off and say, I'm not going to vote, all you're doing is turning the keys over the extremes. And in a country like this, that's not where things get done. So, Josh, I appreciate your story. Kat, I appreciate your introduction. And now the floor is open, so I want to hear from you.